Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. As an elite level runner and coach, I'm excited to introduce you to the All In Running Club. The All In Running Club exists to help you become a better runner. Whether you're a beginner, an elite runner, or anywhere in between, the mission of the All In Running Club is to give you the tools you need to find your success in running. Join today to take advantage of the 75% off yearly membership rate offer. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more. So Jodi, I want to welcome you to the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Great to be here with you, Jerry. Thank you.
So I'm really excited to talk to you because you've got more years than I do in the health and wellness space. And so you've seen probably a little bit more of the transition in how things have gone. But tell us why is in the health and wellness world being that, like we were talking about before we recorded, the non-traditional medical way of being healthy and finding our path in ways that are holistic. Like, why is that important to you?
Very good question. We could talk about this all day long.
Right.
So I have a master's in health psychology, specialized in psychoneuroimmunology, and was pre-med. And so I actually used to train resident physicians in Austin
Oh, wow.
on the biopsychosocial model. And, I also went to the first graduate program in health psychology in the country.
Okay.
And, my goal was that I saw what was missing in medicine in the sense of, the physicians prescribe a medication and then they say, see you later and hope this works out well for you. We're rooting for you.
Right.
And, but come back if you need something.
Yeah.
And so, we weren't looking at the patient as this whole human. And what are the barriers to commitment? What are they eating at home? What is their lifestyle? Yeah. What is their culture? What is their community? Even down to gender, and things that impacted them on the day-to-day in this like holistic integrative sense. And we weren't training our physicians on this. And so we said, is there a way that we can have you stop, interact with them a little bit more and now we call it holistic or integrative medicine. And now what's great is we're seeing that this is being included in medical training now. But even then, I think a lot of these solutions aren't supported by traditional pharma.
Right.
And so therefore it doesn't necessarily still make it to that next step in the holistic health plan that we'll call it.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful to see, over the last, call it 15 years, this advancement. And I also love the human curiosity along with, it's more than anecdotal research now. It used to be, I experienced this, we'll call it mindfulness, or it impacted my health. And it became a story that people shared, but it was a little like, left field.
Right.
And now there's so much more data and research going into these different facets of medicine that can contribute to our longevity. And so I think it's a really exciting time in our like holistic healthcare experience for change and improvement.
Yeah. And it is. And so it's interesting that you were pre-med and sort of heading that direction. Like, so you've always had that desire to help people with their health, but you switched from the traditional to like, and so something triggered in you to say, this is going the wrong way.
Well, it's interesting. So my sister and I, living in the Austin area, we were at the first Whole Foods and working in health food stores. And we started to see the evidence of natural medicine as well.
Right.
And the opportunities there, bringing in supplements, returning to natural products, reading ingredients. And it became a part of who we are every day. So my sister became an herbalist and a midwife. I did a double major in psychology and biology, and that's where that mind body connection really became
Mhm.
aware for me, and that there was too many synergies for
Yeah.
those two to not be working together.
Right.
Um, and then, it's kind of interesting in terms of what brought us to Green Goo and sort of this entrepreneurial extension of who we are.
Yeah.
And what we identified was, here we were living this very clean lifestyle, very much into sustainability. But then you open up our first aid cabinet and it was like all these chemicals and all
Right.
of these tubes being thrown in the landfill. And we looked at each other and we went, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And then you start reading the ingredients in your
Hmm.
traditional first aid OTC products, and then what isn't on the label. And you're like,
Right.
wow. And then you start visiting with others naturalists, and you find that you're not the only one, that natural consumers were willing to abandon their natural ethos because they were told your chemical laden first aid products were the only ones that could get the job done.
Right.
And then you have your traditional consumers who, they just wanted better efficacy. They didn't care
Hmm.
what the ingredients were.
Yep.
They wanted better efficacy. And, when I say that out loud, you almost can see the parallels in the medical industry, right?
Hmm.
That we just say, okay, well, we don't really care what it is. We just want better solutions.
Right.
And then, of course, when we go to our physicians and we think this is the only option, and Western medicine's great. Like, don't misunderstand me, that there's wonderful benefits to the
Sure.
advancement of our medical establishment and capabilities. But there's also some beautiful and effective
Hmm.
alternatives that exceed some of the traditional, or I don't even want to call it traditional, because medicine, these plants have been around for
Right.
thousands of
Right.
years.
Yeah.
And Western medicine as we know it is fairly new.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that like it's more the traditional way of doing
Hmm.
things is going back to what, in one part of it, you could look at it and go like, okay, well, you can't make as much money on it because if somebody can grow their own herbs and then heal themselves with those, if they know how to do it, like, well, where's the money? Right. And so like there's that driving factor. But like you said, if somebody can go into a lab and create something that gets the results either faster or like more of a guaranteed result, like then people
Safer,
can like
right?
people can tend to like go like, okay, well, I believe this way for all these things, but okay, that's available,
Hmm.
without knowing that okay, there are other options. There's plant-based natural things. And not that, I mean, some of the medicine's obviously natural or has
Hmm.
roots in natural, but it's also got chemicals in it that can be it can get the job done, but then also possibly create something else at the same time.
So true. And we talk to people about green goo and using it as their topical therapeutic, and we're like, it probably goes against capitalism, because the more you use green goo, the less you end up needing it,
Right.
because you're nourishing and you're hydrating your skin and it becomes more powerful and healthy.
Hmm.
And so it to your point, it kind of contradicts, capitalism in itself. And I think at
Right.
the end of the day, to your point, if you can find solutions that are healthy and reduce the contraindications and can also be sustainable and good for the planet and then perform, I mean, why not?
Right.
It can be made in a lab.
Yeah.
Um, but there are fewer of those that we know of today.
Yeah. Well, and so from the psychology piece, is this so now I'm like, like, because I know a lot of where we are as a country with our health, both from a nutrition standpoint and a pharmaceutical standpoint, a lot of it is because of marketing and advertising, right?
Hmm.
And so it's that psychology piece of, feeding you messages that this is, our way is the best way. When a lot of times we get there and go, okay, but I've tried that before and it didn't work, or long term didn't work, right? And so then which makes me think, especially for men, when they think about going to the doctor, they're like, no, I don't want to go to the doctor because they're just going to tell me I've got things wrong. They're going to give me something for it that I don't want to be on because of side effects or whatever. And so I'll just live with what I've got because I don't know the other options. Right. And
And I
that's not a good
think
place to be.
no, no. And I think that's where taking healthcare into our own hands and individualizing it in the way that we're seeing that evolution happen
Mhm.
is really fantastic
Yeah.
because you do have to do a little bit more daily work. It's more intentional, but you do get the results that you're looking for. And I
Mhm.
think it's just changing that paradigm of like, okay, I'm supposed to go in and someone's going to give me this one thing that fixes me instead of saying, I am taking ownership of my existence.
Right.
This is the one body that I get for this lifetime. I think it was Diaries of the CEO. It's like, what if you had someone told you or reminded you that this is the one car you were going to have your entire life?
Mm.
Would you really drive it as hard as you do? Would
Right.
you like be as rough of it on it as you would knowing that this is it for you?
Yeah.
And I don't know that we ever really think about it in that context. And I think too, we talked a little bit about this before we went on that medicine could be more of a privilege for some people,
Sure.
and so what I love that some of these things that keep us healthy don't cost anything.
Right.
And so it's that information that is power getting to the people
Mhm.
that they can start saying, hey, I can own my own mind body medicine. I might not be able to go to Whole Foods and get the most expensive, vitamin that's on the shelf, but perhaps I can make something that's similar and gives me the same results in the food that I'm eating.
Right.
And heck, half the time it's not what you are, what you should be eating. It's what you should be avoiding to
Right.
eat. You know,
Yes.
a lot of the other stuff's pretty basic if you don't give
Yeah.
your body some of the things that, challenges it all day, every day.
Right. Right. Well, and that's, thinking about, and that can be for anywhere from skin products to
Mhm.
food to, and of course, the media that you're consuming. Like there's so many things that when you look at your overall health and wellness, that like there's so many things that I think that we get caught up doing, whether it's habit or, just tradition, family traditions that have been just taught ingrained in us, that like we just get sort of stuck doing these things in an autopilot for me, and we're just like, oh, well, I didn't realize that, and one of the things that comes to mind is just like sunscreen, because okay, you don't use a
Ugh.
lot of sunscreen in the wintertime, but in the, when the spring, summer comes around, it's like, why do you automatically go buy the same one? Like start to think and go like, oh, wait, maybe I should look at some of the new things that are out there in the alternatives that are more natural based, because every year there's a new crop of things that are coming out because of people like you that are like, oh, let's find a different solution.
Don't get me started on sunscreen. I remember being in my organic chemistry class in undergrad, and we were breaking apart the sunscreen, chemical equation, if you
Yeah.
will. And all of a sudden, I'm like, "There's oxybenzone in here. This is a known carcinogen." I raise my hand, and I'm like, "We have a known carcinogen in a sunscreen." And the professor's like, "Yep, we sure do." I'm like, how? Why?
Yeah.
Well, it just happens to be the thing that someone discovered that, reflects the radiation of the rays or what have you. And I'm like, but we're not setting humanity up for success.
Right.
We're what are we doing? And I think it's a great analogy for, call it, marketing and expectations.
Mhm.
Perhaps we weren't meant to be sitting in the sun for 12 hours a day, and therefore we shouldn't expect to have a product to put on our bodies
Right.
to be in the sun for that long. For us, when we're developing products, that's kind of the interesting challenge is, well, we got to lead with efficacy first. We got to
Mhm.
perform first, and because you can't have a wound and then be like, well, you know what, it's natural, it's okay if it gets infected.
Right.
No, it needs to actually work.
Right.
But then it's also the expectation where the consumer's coming in. So if you've been putting sunscreen on for 12, put it on once and it works for 12 hours. That's the expectation of the consumer. And the
Mhm.
reality is, like, when I'm looking at all the natural ingredients our sunscreen has 7 ingredients,
Mhm.
and every single one of the ingredients in there actually has a small amount of natural sun protection. So it like compounds it. Um, until you get into your, the zinc oxide. But
Right.
the reality is, and you'll see this on natural products, you got to reapply,
Sure.
and so I'm telling my daughter, she's like, oh, I want the one that I just put on for the whole day. And I'm like, honey, you weren't meant to.
Yeah.
It's not. So either put this on and reapply, or after a handful of hours, get out of the sun. And
Right.
so perhaps there's some analogy there to extract in terms of how we approach our healthcare, and maybe how we've been influenced to think, what should work. It's interesting to think about.
No, I think it is. And I think it's something that you can take to other parts of life. Like we're not meant to have fast food every day, right? Like in for people in my generation and in older, like I'm sure we remember like, okay, that was a special treat,
Right.
right? To be able to go get fast food. That was a special treat. It was once a week at best. Like, okay, we did this, we'll go get that, like, and now and it's just amazing how many people, yeah, I've got teenagers, and it's like to see their friends and how many of them eat fast food every day,
Oh,
multiple
yeah.
meals. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, what? And so you go back to it and go like, okay, well, if we know what's in the food is not overall healthy for us, and I've told my clients, it's like, okay, one meal is not going to kill you unless you
Right.
choke on it and nobody's there to give you the Heimlich. Like otherwise, one meal by itself, you're not going to fall over dead. But if you do it all the time and you know that it's damaging for you, what do you expect is going to happen?
My husband and I had this conversation yesterday about dessert. And we were like, remember when dessert was like a treat? Because we do a
Yeah.
lot of intermittent fasting.
Hmm.
And so, and we're like, goodness, like if someone is having dessert every night after
Hmm.
dinner, and when you start looking at how you might intermittently fast, like it's the worst thing for you to have.
Yeah.
If it's a treat and it's on occasion, that's great. That's not a
Right.
problem.
Right.
But dessert is now, you know, in our mindset, it's what you do. It's
Right.
what you're supposed to have. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a part of the meal. It's
Yeah.
not
It's
it's
a
not
part
the
of the
treat.
meal.
It's a part of the meal. It's what is for dessert, not can we have dessert?
Right.
It's a completely different scenario. Um, so so you've decided to go into the plant-based products. How much of how much of a struggle was there, like figuring that out compared to like the mainstream stuff that's being produced?
And still figuring out, to your point,
Yeah.
because um so what's unique about my mom's sister and I starting this company together, this plant-based first aid, Green Goo, is that, we were making it in our kitchen
Hmm.
and taking it to farmers markets and changing people's lives. And while
Hmm.
we're changing their lives, they're changing our lives because they're coming back to us with just these incredible testimonials. And so, and then retailers start reaching out to us, and we
Right.
didn't know even what that meant. What is a UPC, and
Right.
how do you do this?
Yep.
But we recognized very quickly that we wanted to be credible in the market, and that we needed to play by those rules in
Hmm.
order to do that. So we wanted an FDA regulated facility. We wanted to register with the FDA, have an OTC monograph, really speak to those active ingredients, even though the FDA only recognizes a certain amount of herbs
Right.
as being active. We would love to say there's more, but right now they're still building that library, and that's okay
Right.
because it's began.
Right.
But when we first went to manufacturers, we must have had 10, at least 10 say nope, nope, nope.
Really.
Nobody, yeah. And the reality is that no one wanted to make these pre-made extra, or excuse me, nobody wanted to do this unique infusion process that we do. They wanted us to use the pre-made extracts that were already on the market. And we're like, but this is what makes it so different. This is why it works. And it actually took a manufacturer whose son had eczema. He used our product. And a week later, he said, you know what? I don't know how we're going to scale this, but we're going to, because the world needs these products. And to this day, that's one of our key manufacturers.
Hmm.
And we have these beautiful vats where we're extracting the medicinal properties from these plants, high amounts of medicinal properties, and they're unique blends that go into all of these products. So you can't get this concentration anywhere. You can't get this blend anywhere. And so that was a big one in terms of taking an old world concept. I mean,
Right.
this is another one of those, it's been around for a long time, but bringing it into, call it post-industrial revolution, and trying to put it into, this size, this
Right.
fits. I do credit the cannabis industry for, kind of the tipping point for Green Goo, because then it was the information out, from a consumer standpoint.
Hmm.
For the first time, they saw how you could have medicinal properties from a plant. And
Right.
so, I was at a trade show and the farm bill was just getting ready to pass. And, here we've been talking about plant-based solutions for 5 years, and it was still it was hard for people to really gravitate to unless you tried it. Like if
Right.
someone tried it, done.
Right.
But talking about it wasn't enough. And
Yeah.
so there was a lunch with a keynote speaker that was talking to these retailers about, hey, here's how you can have hemp products in your store. Farm bill's passing in a couple weeks. This is how it works. This is how they extract. This is the medicinal properties. They came back to my booth and I was like, so you remember what they talked about at lunch? That's what we do, but we don't
Mhm.
use hemp. We use 100 other plants that
Right.
have all these beautiful plant profiles. And it was like the light bulb went off.
Yeah.
And then I really think the plant-based renaissance is an extension of that. And of course, we're seeing, so much more data and research around alternative modalities outside of
Right.
that space. That's been really fascinating. I mean, you get
Yeah.
into, heck psychedelics and longevity, and it's really fun to be a part of that now. I mean, it always
Hmm.
was, but I feel like, it's less anecdotal. There's more data around it. I mean, heck, there's research coming out with, the Journal of Behavioral Medicine and
Hmm.
dermatology, and looking
Yeah.
at mindfulness and how, meditation can impact your eczema flare-ups. And
Right.
so, seeing some really great advancements that I think for Green Goo puts Green Goo in a better place for people to be more open to
Mhm.
trying a plant-based alternative that will then be superior in efficacy than anything that they've ever had.
Right.
But there was, we'll call it natural hesitancy, because I think the natural market was really more like lotions and natural shampoos. And
Right.
anybody who chose natural, it was, I'm making a sacrifice because I want clean ingredients or I care about the environment, but I know it's not going to perform better. I'd really rather use that Pantene shampoo because it really
Right.
helps my curls,
Yeah.
something like that. But I'm making the sacrifice. And so I like changing the conversation around natural,
Yeah.
because I think the early days of natural were extracts and industrial revolution processes. They were still
Hmm.
using alcohol, they were still using emulsifiers, they were still
Right.
diluting concentration. So I wouldn't even call that, the pureness that you can have today
Right.
in a product.
Well, and one of the things that consumers, I think, are starting to be aware of is that natural, just sort of like organic, it doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% healthy for me.
Yep.
Like, because
Lots of
something can be
greenwashing.
natural, and yeah, exactly. It's like it doesn't always make it there. Whereas when I see something and it says 100% plant-based, then I'm like, okay, I know that whether or not everything in there is going to give me the result I want because the formula may not be right or whatever, but like I know that they put the effort into this product to make sure that it's chemical free, it's not going to damage me, all those types of things are going to be a part of it. And I know that that means that they also went through a very big process to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not just going to a manufacturer or a lab and saying, "Hey, put this chemical and that chemical and this thing and that," and it's like it's easy for them to do that. Like you said, you've now got to extract these things out of the plants, which takes more time.
It does. And I think, big companies get really clever with marketing, and so they
Hmm.
can make their packaging look like it's natural. And
Right.
so, my daughter has an app that she uses and she's being influenced. She's 12, she's
Hmm.
influenced by TikTok and all these things with different ingredients. And so I really want to put ownership on her rather than me saying, hey, no, 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 no.
Right.
And so
Right.
she has this app, and I love when she comes to me and she's like, Mom, like, look at this packaging. I thought for sure that this was going to be, in the
Mhm.
90 percentile for natural. And she's like, it's zero. It's zero, Mom.
Yeah.
And so it allows her to be a discerning consumer while
Mhm.
also making, good decisions for herself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the biggest piece is that education piece, right? And like you've said, it's not just create the product and have it out there and people are going to naturally go to it because it's 100% plant-based. And so, they're going to naturally know that it's less side effects or chemical free or all these things. But it's the education piece of, okay, it is all these things, but it also works. And this is why it works, right? Here's the extra benefit to you.
You bring up a good point, and it kind of underscores what you talked about earlier too, in terms of like your son and his friends eating
Hmm.
fast food, every day. And, one time's not going to hurt you. So we use an acronym in our home, and it's called Shaman.
Okay.
And so it allows my daughter to make quick decisions, to think about how this may or may not impact you so that you can
Hmm.
just choose wisely. So
Right.
S is for sleep. And we
Yep.
always say, like, add to your sleep bank. She wanted to
Hmm.
have a sleepover last night. It was late start today. And we're like, it's in the middle of the week and you're gonna take from your sleep bank and is it worth it today?
Right.
You've
Yeah.
got volleyball and dance and all those things.
Yep.
And obviously it's important. H, hydration.
Hmm.
So it's thinking about, okay, when she chooses her beverage for the day, or throughout the day, because they're going and they're kids and they're going to the gas stations and all that
Right.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
But it's so choosing those wisely, but it's also the body care products. So there's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of ingredients that pull hydration out of your skin.
Hmm.
And that is not any different than not drinking water,
Yeah.
So when I talk about hydration with my daughter, I'm like, look at ingredients as well. Like aloe vera, rosehip oil, calendula. There are herbs that have hydrating properties to them.
Hmm.
Thinking about that while also your beverages and so forth.
Right.
A is avoid, so just like we talked about, there's certain things that are more important to avoid than it is
Yeah.
just what you intake.
Yeah.
So it's avoid phthalates, parabens, fragrances. I mean, phthalates is out of control on this planet.
Yeah.
US produces 1 billion pounds of that alone a year. Um, and alcohol, just things that
Hmm.
you can avoid and just temper it. You
Right.
can't necessarily avoid it all the time, but if you can look at a bottle of water and say, do I want the plastic water bottle or do I want the aluminum one?
Hmm.
Quick choice. You can just go ahead and pick the aluminum one because it's just water.
Right.
Save yourself from some of those phthalates.
Right.
Um, M is mindfulness, and adding to that, I mean, so incredible how meditation and mindfulness and just intentionality has with your peace and your longevity. And then the next A is antioxidants, and that just helps her
Hmm.
remember food. Whether you're going to pick a blueberry or a candy bar, you know.
Right.
But then you go back to food for your skin, how we are with Green Goo. Like when I'm formulating with my sister, we're looking at what other you know, like things nutritive resources we can put in. Like our
Right.
deodorant has vitamin C, ashwagandha, holy basil, reishi mushroom,
Oh
ginkgo, because
wow.
heck, why not? Like you're putting deodorant on, why not have this place that absorbs so
Hmm.
much,
Hmm.
have that under your skin? And
Right.
then N is nutrition. And nutrition, again, the same thing, from the food sources, from the body care that you have.
Right.
And that one little word has empowered my daughter and really all of us, just so we can make some quick decisions throughout the day to just kind of steer us in
Right.
the right direction. And it's pretty impressive how, if you keep track, how much it can impact you.
Right. Well, I love that. And I love that you're doing that because one of the things that I try to get my kids to understand is that, like, okay, yes, I'm sort of known in the area as the health nut, the health guru, the health, all this stuff, right? And so they're like, they don't like to go to the grocery store with me because they're like, can I get this? I'm like, no, you can't get that.
Mhm.
And where mom will be like, okay, we can get, let's go get some things. And I'm okay with it. But what I want them to understand is, okay, well, if you get that, how's it going to make you feel?
Yeah.
What's your reaction going to be? Is it going to be, is it going to cause this or that or the other thing? Whether it's going to disrupt your sleep or it's going to, my son has ADHD. And so it's like, is it going to cause you to go crazy? Like, we talk about these things and to the point where now he knows like, okay, if I do that, it's going to have this effect. A lot of times he still chooses it because he's a 12-year-old
Mhm.
boy,
Right.
but he knows like, okay, wait a minute. I probably shouldn't do that during the week. I'll wait till the weekend, have that, get it out of my system by Monday. Um, Whereas my daughter is 14-year-old and she is like, I know I can't have that because it's going to make me do this, and I have a test this week and I have a band performance or, and so she is starting to grasp those things and understand that it's not that I don't want her to have it because it's unhealthy, period, end of statement. But
Right.
it's like, I want you to understand so that as you are no longer in the house when you're 18 to 21, whenever that point is, that you can then continue to make healthy decisions for yourself.
100%. It's like, hear me now, believe me later.
Right.
But at
Exactly.
least you're getting these sound bites so that you can have this powerful information to guide you and just have you live a healthier, happier life
Right.
in those moments and be able to navigate. Like I love that you said that your daughter is making those considerations because she's like, I've got a test, and she
Mhm.
understands how those food choices or her sleep or what have you are going to impact her performance,
Right.
and making that connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wish we taught that in the school system, you know, emotional intelligence and nutrition
Mhm.
in a more meaningful way, because if you could be empowered by this at a younger age,
Yeah.
um, it would just be such a special gift,
Yeah.
such a special gift.
And it's something that like when I look back at my life, like I made choices from a nutrition standpoint and a hydration standpoint because I was an athlete and I wanted to perform my best. And so I really fine-tuned. It wasn't like looking at my longevity, it wasn't looking at an ethical standpoint, it wasn't looking at chemical side effects or anything. It was just sort of like, okay, I know this is going to make me until I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm no longer that type of athlete anymore. And I got into the corporate world and doing just middle management jobs and away from health. And until one day I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, I can't believe I have to go up another pant size. What is wrong with me? Like, what is something's wrong with the knowledge I have is not being applied. And I think that's the piece that I changed in myself and I dropped the 50 pounds that I had gained. And now I have a goal of living super long and I'm trying to figure all those things out. But the additional steps now to what I already know. But when you look at that from that educational piece again, like that's a huge piece for people to have to come to grips with and understand. Like I am in control of myself, and there are things I can do, and
Yeah.
there are things out there that I can put into my life that can overcome the pharmaceutically created things that are out there.
Here's one for you. But that I've just really enjoyed this new sense of awareness here. So obviously holistic skincare is a
Mhm.
passion for me.
Mhm.
But what I have discovered, which is very interesting, and I'm sure you are familiar with telomeres.
Yes.
And yes, and so they're like the end caps of our
Mhm.
DNA, and we can measure them, to give us some insight to our longevity. And so we're looking at different components that impact, those telomeres. And
Mhm.
some more recent data that came out was that in our epidermis, we have a larger volume of an enzyme that can be produced to regenerate our telomeres.
Oh, wow.
And so the interesting connection is, and that has a systemic relationship with the rest of our body. And so
Mhm.
perhaps humans got off on the wrong track when we realized, oh, when your skin looks beautiful, it means you're healthy.
Mhm.
And so then we went, and used the wrong kinds of things to make us look beautiful, where it would give you a temporary sense of beauty, but was
Right.
really just like, I don't know, call it a lip plumper, and
Mhm.
it pulled the water out for, to make it look plumper for a minute, but then it,
Right.
extracted. Well, now, we're looking at more of this plant research, and we're seeing like calendula has plant stem cell properties
Mhm.
and can actually perhaps stimulate this enzyme that then encourages telomere regeneration.
Oh,
And
wow.
so all of a sudden you start looking at your skin a little bit differently. That
Mhm.
here we've been said, our skin was just a protective layer. It's just our largest organ. Well, what if it actually has a more of a relationship with our overall health and wellness than we ever thought?
Right.
And perhaps like that's the value of nourishing our skin. So it just goes back to like you
Wow.
think of health in one way, and
Mhm.
it's what we were taught, and you were motivated to eat healthy because you wanted to perform well, because you were an athlete. Well, we wanted to use all these beauty care products because we wanted to look prettier, because maybe it was an adaptive, evolutionary thing that we know.
Right.
And now we're getting some really good data behind maybe we really do need food for our skin,
Yeah.
And so uh it's fun to get more of that information to say, how else can I create an integrative, individualized health and
Mhm.
wellness ownership,
Right.
over these one vehicle that we get for our entire life.
Right. Well, and that's like you mentioned the skin being the largest organ, and when you really start to think about what the skin does, and it you start to realize and go far beyond just you know sun damage in that
Hmm.
conversation. Like you start to
Yeah.
go way beyond that, and in you start thinking about like you had talked about like deodorant you use, like making sure that it's not got chemicals in it because of what can it again back to like the what not to eat, like what not to put on your skin, like what not to
Mhm.
absorb, because your skin does absorb stuff and it
Yeah.
goes straight into your body. And if it's the largest organ and you're putting it all over your body, the concentration amount can be enormous.
Right. And why do things like BioTouch work with people with PTSD? You start wondering, the sensory experience of your skin and the mind body relationship. And you start to have a little bit more appreciation for the skin in terms
Yeah.
of maybe I should treat it a little better.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And and again coming back to like and so I know this is going to sound weird, and it's actually something that I thought about today, and I was like, I wonder if I should change this now. And so you may be the perfect person to ask for this. But so I decided to become vegan, I think it's been 5 or 6 years ago. And as an athlete, one of the things that I thought was interesting, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to do an experiment. I, I was not quite finished with the full year, but I noticed that my scent changed when I would exercise, in that I didn't have a smell anymore. Like I didn't smell sweaty, like I was, because like I
Interesting.
wasn't ingesting the chemicals and the stuff. And so like and so I stopped for like I think it was like 6 weeks at the first little experiment I did. I stopped using soap in the shower because I was like,
I
do I
don't need
need
it.
soap? I don't smell. I just need to wipe the dirt off, but I don't need to necessarily uncover anything or um and I stopped like really, scraping my skin layers off and just like, oh, they're there to protect me. Let me just
Hmm.
see. Um so the first experiment was like, okay, can I do it for a period of time and have my wife not notice, right? Because like if I'm going to start getting stinky, like that's going to be a problem, and so that's not going to work. But for like 4 or 5 years now, I have not used soap except to wash my hands when they get dirty.
Right.
Like otherwise, I haven't used soap. And I was thinking about it today, and I was like, I wonder if that's something that I should go back to, or not. But from a skin standpoint.
I mean, what I'm hearing is you've got some really good homeostasis, and
Mhm.
why disrupt that?
Right.
which means your body is excreting and operating at a very optimal level.
Mhm.
Because oftentimes what we emit, call it smell or what have you, is just a way of the body just detoxifying and
Right.
doing what it needs to do.
Right.
And so I think you've got something solid going on there. That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, and it's yeah, I mean it is, and it's like granted, it's like from a financial standpoint, it's minimal. It's not like it's saving me hundreds of dollars and so um but it's just it to me though, it shows, like you said, like what you put in is going to come out,
Yeah.
and your skin is filtering that and has to deal with that. And so if you don't put stuff in, it's a really good indicator of
Yeah.
like, what am I putting in? How do I smell? And when your smell changes, that's an indicator that you put something different in.
That's so true. And yet we've spent, and who knows, maybe this is just the last 100 years. Um, we've spent so much time trying to avoid smells and use more
Hmm.
chemicals to, you know, push that down. And
Right.
in fact, one, it could be giving us a message.
Right.
And two, the more we push it down, the more challenging, the more challenges we're bringing to that body who's working so hard to serve us.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah,
Exactly. So,
interesting. I like it.
um, well, it's good to hear because, I mean, it's one of those things that like, you know, you know what's going on because of how you feel, but there's always the okay, but what about that 1% of thing that could be just the random whatever that I get exposed to, or and that's always the piece that it's like, okay, how I'm trying to do everything I can to protect myself from everything out there that's trying to kill me because this is all I got. Like you said, like this is all I got. I want to live a long time and experience a lot of things. And so it's like, how do we hack, for a better, for lack of a better word, how do we
Hmm.
hack ourselves into all that stuff? And a lot of it, from what I found, and which is why I wanted to have you on to expose you to my listeners, is that it's looking at the plant-based stuff, not necessarily the vegan stuff, making sure that it's 100% plant-based, because those two things can be different.
True. And the data is there to support that our bodies love it.
Yeah.
They love it, they invite it. There's a reason why we use the plant-based oils as the carrier to bringing in those medicinal properties. They're really the transporter, and it's because the body just loves it so much. And so it's a great vehicle versus, you've got a paraben or a petroleum that's sitting on the surface of the skin. And so when you start to think of what makes the body happy and why, it really simplifies what you decide to engage
Right.
in,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
um, and you feel like we
Yeah.
were talking about earlier, like the more you start using Green Goo, the more you use it, the less you need it.
Yeah.
And that's a great feeling too,
Right. Yep.
it gets your body, because your body can do beautiful things.
Hmm.
We just need to give it what it needs to do that and
Yeah.
avoid the things that make it difficult for it to
Right.
do that.
Right. Yep. I fully agree with that. I've said that exact same thing so many times. Give your body what it wants and get out of the way, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And it will do you right.
Yep. Well, so Jody, so how do people connect with you, find Green Goo, and all the products that you'll have?
Yeah, greengoo.com. We got all kinds of
Okay.
goodies there. So yeah, come
Perfect.
see us and you can get to know the family and all that jazz.
Perfect. So I will put the link in the show notes. Um, I want to thank you for all that you're doing and applaud you because I know it's not an easy road. Um, like you said about your manufacturing and trying to get it all started. Um, but hopefully it can continue to grow and prosper and help people the way that I know it is helping people.
Thank you for what you're doing and being a part of that information funnel that's out there. And I'm thrilled to be a part of it. And it's just exciting to help. I think this is a beautiful time in humanity for us to take a shift in our existence and longevity. So I'm thrilled to be a part of that information source. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.